The air in Minsu's workshop was still and thick with the smell of old metal and ozone. It was a small space, tucked away in a less traveled section of the great space station, the Aegis Spire. Wires and broken machine parts covered every flat surface. In the middle of it all, Minsu sat on a low stool, his hands working on a broken data slate. His hands were steady. They had always been steady. But his eyes, which once held a sharp and confident light, were now tired. He was a man who had fallen from a great height. Once he had been a respected teacher of combat. He had trained some of the best human soldiers on the station. But that was a long time ago. A bad thing had happened. A training exercise had gone wrong. A young student, full of promise, had died. The official report said it was a terrible accident, a failure of equipment, but Minsu knew the truth. The failure had been his. He was the teacher. The responsibility was his. After that, his reputation was broken. People looked at him with pity or with blame. So he left. He hid himself away in the small workshop, fixing simple things for little money. It was a quiet life, a safe life, a life without the weight of another person's safety on his shoulders. The soft hiss of his door opening broke the silence. Minsu did not look up. People sometimes came by to drop off broken appliances. Place it on the table. I will look at it tomorrow, he said, his voice rough from lack of use. I am not here for a repair, a voice replied. It was a young woman's voice, quiet and polite. Minsu finally looked up. A young woman stood just inside the doorway. She was human with dark hair tied simply behind her head. She wore the plain gray clothes of a low-level station worker. She was not tall, and her frame was slender, not like the strong, muscular warriors he used to train. She looked ordinary. What do you want then? Minsu asked, turning back to his data slate. He was not in the mood for visitors. My name is Ji-young, she said, taking a small step forward. I have come to ask for your help. I need you to teach me. Minsu let out a short, harsh laugh. Teach you what? How to fix a data slate. You are in the wrong place. The technical school is on deck 7. No, Ji-young said, her voice still calm. I need you to teach me to fight. This made Minsu stop his work. He put down his tools and slowly turned to face her fully. He looked her up and down again. She was serious. You are mistaken, he said, his tone flat and final. I am not a teacher anymore. I fix things. That is all. I know who you are, Minsu, Ji-young said. You were the best. I have read about your methods. Your understanding of close-quarters combat is unique. My methods are obsolete. Minsu snapped, a flash of old anger rising in his chest. They are from a time people have forgotten. Look outside. He gestured vaguely towards the wall, towards the rest of the massive station. The galaxy uses energy shields and plasma casters now. They use targeting computers and drone support. No one needs an old man to teach them how to fight with their hands. It is a waste of time. I do not think it is a waste, she replied, her gaze steady. Why? Minsu asked, his frustration growing. So you can feel tough? So you can show off to your friends? Real combat is not a game. It is ugly, it is fast, and people get hurt. People die. The memory of his student's face flashed in his mind, sharp and painful. I will not be responsible for that again. Now please leave. He stood up, intending to guide her firmly to the door. He was taller than her, and his presence had once been intimidating. He hoped it still was, but Ji-young did not move. She did not look scared. She simply stood there, a quiet, unmovable object in his path. Her calmness was starting to annoy him. Who did she think she was? I need this training, she insisted softly. It is important. Important? Minsu's voice rose. Important for what? A promotion? A better job? You do not look like a soldier. You do not carry yourself like a warrior. You look like you work in a garden. Why would you need to learn how to fight? He was standing right in front of her now, looking down into her face. He saw no fear there, only a deep, patient resolve that he did not understand. It made him angrier. He needed her to leave. He needed the silence back. Who are you? He demanded, the question bursting out of him. It was not just a question of her name. It was a question of her entire being. Who was she to walk into his life and demand this from him? Who was she to think she could handle the things he taught? Who are you to ask this of me? He put a hand on her shoulder to gently but firmly push her towards the door. As he did, she shifted her weight slightly. The movement was small, but it caused the long, narrow package strapped to her back to shift. It was wrapped in a simple worn cloth. Minsu had not paid it any attention before, assuming it was a tool of some kind. But as she moved, the cloth covering the top of the object slipped loose. The station's artificial light caught the exposed end of the object. It was not a tool. It was the handle of a sword. Minsu's hand froze on her shoulder. His eyes, which had been full of anger and impatience, were now locked on the handle. It was simple, made of a dark, worn wood wrapped in leather that was stained from years of use. It was a design he had not seen in a very, very long time. His anger vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp curiosity. "What is that?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Ji-young looked at him, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of something else in her eyes. Not fear, but caution. Without another word, Minsu reached out, his movements slow and deliberate. He carefully pulled back the rest of the cloth, uncovering the weapon. It was a straight, single-edged sword, a simple and brutal design. The metal of the blade was a dull gray, not shiny or decorative. It was a tool for one thing only. His eyes, trained to see the smallest details, scanned the blade. And then he saw it. Etched into the flat of the metal near the handle were words. They were not in the common galactic script that everyone used now. They were in an old form of human writing, from the early days of space travel. He had to squint to read them, the letters stirring old memories from his history lessons. The words read, Galactic Wars. The noisy, cluttered workshop fell into a deep silence. Minsu's hand, which had been on Ji-young's shoulder, dropped to his side. He stood completely still, his eyes fixed on the two words etched into the blade, Galactic Wars. They were more than just words. They were a ghost. A story from so long ago that most people today thought it was just a legend, a wild tale told to children. He remembered the history. It was not one big war, but many terrible fights. It happened right after humans first met other species. The galactic community was big and powerful. They had strong shields and powerful energy weapons. They thought humans were primitive, easy to conquer. They were wrong. Humanity was pushed to the edge. They were outnumbered and their technology was weak. So they fought in a way the galaxy did not understand. They fought with a fierce, stubborn will. They used clever tricks and dirty tactics. When their ships were damaged, they fought hand-to-hand on broken decks. When they ran out of bullets, they used knives and, yes, sometimes even swords. They refused to give up. The Galactic Wars were a time of great pain and great heroism. The veterans of those wars were the toughest humans who had ever lived. Most were long dead. Their weapons were in museums, but this sword was not in a museum. It was here in his dusty workshop, held by this quiet, ordinary-looking young woman. Minsu's mind was racing. His own problems, his shame, and his sadness suddenly felt very small. He looked from the blade to Ji-young's face. Her expression was guarded now. The polite, timid girl was gone. In her place was someone much older, much more careful. "Where did you get this?" Minsu's voice was a dry whisper. He cleared his throat. "This is a relic, a story. It should not exist." Ji-young slowly pulled the cloth back over the handle, hiding it from view. "It is not a relic," she said. Her voice was different now. The softness was gone, replaced by a flat, solid tone. "It is a reminder." "A reminder of what?" Minsu asked, his eyes wide. "Those wars ended centuries ago. We are part of the galactic community now. We have peace. We have a treaty," Ji-young corrected him. "That is not the same as peace." She looked at the sword on her back, then back at him. "And it was my father's and his father's before him. It has been passed down." Minsu took a step back, bumping into his workbench. The tools rattled. He felt like the world had just tilted. This was impossible. This was like meeting a figure from a history book. "So you are, what, a historian?" he asked, trying to make sense of it. "I'm a reminder," she said again, as if that explained everything. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. The air between them was charged with a new energy. Minsu's earlier anger was completely gone. Now he felt only a deep, shaking awe and 1,000 new questions. He walked unsteadily to a cleaner part of his bench and sat down. He gestured for her to take the stool opposite him. She did, moving with a quiet grace he had not noticed before. "Please," he said, the word feeling strange in his mouth. He was not used to saying please. "Tell me." Ji-young looked around the messy workshop, her eyes taking in the broken machines and the layers of dust. It was the home of a broken man. She seemed to be deciding if this was the right place, if he was the right person. The galaxy has a short memory. she began, her voice low. They see humans now. They see our new ships, our trading posts, our diplomats. They think we are like them. They have forgotten what it took for us to get here. They have forgotten the price. The Galactic Wars, Minsu said. She nodded. Yes, but not just the big battles. The small ones, too. The fights on lonely asteroids. The last stands on colony ships. The years of fear and hunger. My family, a few other families. We do not forget. We are the keepers of that memory. We remember the old ways of fighting, the old ways of surviving, so that if the day ever comes again, we are not starting from nothing. So you are a soldier? Minsu asked. I am a guardian, she replied. My duty is to remember and to be ready. Minsu looked at the wrapped sword on her back. He thought about her quiet request for training. It suddenly made a terrible, frightening sense. She was not learning for a promotion or for glory. She was learning for a purpose he could barely imagine. But why me? He asked, feeling a familiar pang of his own failure. You know what happened? I am not that teacher anymore, I am this. He waved a hand at the clutter around them. I know what happened, Ji-young said, her gaze direct and without pity. A student died. It was a tragedy, but it was an accident. You were one of the last instructors who studied the old combat manuals from the wars. You understood that the mind is the first weapon. You taught awareness and strategy and how to use your environment. You did not just teach how to punch. The galaxy has forgotten that too. They rely on their technology too much. She leaned forward slightly. I do not need to learn how to be strong. I already know how to fight in the old way, but I need to learn how to move in this world. She gestured to the station around them. I need to understand modern tactics, modern technology. I need to learn how my old skills can work today. You can teach me that. You can bridge the past and the present. Minsu was silent. He looked at his hands, which had been shaking just moments ago. Now they were still. He felt a strange sensation like a cold, clear water flowing through him. It was purpose. It was a reason to look up from his broken data slates. This was not about redeeming himself for his past mistake. He knew he could never truly do that. This was about something bigger. This was about history. This was about the survival of his entire species, remembered by one young woman with a sword. Will you show me? He asked quietly. Will you show me what you can do? Ji-young studied his face. She saw the change in him. The tiredness was still there, but the emptiness was gone. There was a light in his eyes again. Yes, she said, but not here. Minsu stood up. His body felt lighter. I know a place. He led her out of the workshop and into the bright, clean corridors of the Aegis Spire. Beings of all shapes and sizes moved around them. No one gave the two humans a second glance. They took a transport tube to a public training facility. It was a large open space with high ceilings. The air hummed with the sound of energy weapons hitting targets and the grunts of beings practicing combat. In one area, a large, bulky Gron was lifting heavy weights. In another, a sleek Veth was practicing with a plasma caster, its movements fluid and precise. They both glanced at Minsu and Ji-young as they entered, then looked away, uninterested. Minsu led Ji-young to a quiet, empty mat. Here, he said, show me a basic fighting form. Anyone you know, Ji-young nodded. She slipped the wrapped sword from her back and placed it carefully on the floor at the edge of the mat. Then she walked to the center. She closed her eyes for a moment, took a slow breath, and began. It was not a flashy or dramatic series of moves. There were no high kicks or spinning jumps. It was a simple, direct sequence of steps, turns, and strikes. But every movement was perfect. There was no wasted motion. Every shift of her weight, every position of her hands was designed for one thing: maximum effect with minimum effort. It was the fighting style of someone who had no energy to spare. It was the style of a survivor. Minsu watched, his heart beating fast. He had seen this before, but only in old, grainy historical videos. This was the combat doctrine of the Galactic Wars. It was ugly. It was efficient. It was beautiful. The Gron had stopped lifting weights. The Veth had lowered its plasma caster. They were both watching now, their expressions curious. They had never seen a human move like that. When Ji-young finished, she stood perfectly still, her breathing calm and even. She looked at Minsu. He could only nod, his throat too tight for words. He finally understood. The question was no longer who she was. The question was he ready to help her? He looked at the curious and now slightly mocking faces of the Gron and the Veth. He looked back at Ji-young, standing calm and ready on the mat. He knew his answer. The broken teacher was gone. The mentor had returned. The training hall fell silent after Ji-young finished her form. The only sound was the low hum of the station's life support systems. The Gron and the Veth had stopped their own practice to watch. They were not impressed. To them it looked like a simple primitive dance. The Veth, a tall, slender being with smooth gray skin and large black eyes, let out a soft clicking sound that was its version of a laugh. It placed its plasma caster carefully on a rack and walked over, its movements fluid and silent. That was an interesting display, the Veth said, its voice a dry whisper. It looked at Minsu, recognizing him vaguely. You are the human instructor who does not instruct anymore. Are you teaching this one old folk dances? Minsu felt a flash of his old temper, but he kept his voice calm. It is a combat form, Kalen. Something from before your people relied entirely on powered weapons. The Veth, Kalen, made the clicking sound again. Combat? With no weapon, it is quaint. Its large black eyes turned to Ji-young, looking her up and down with clear disdain. That metal stick on your back. You do not seriously intend to fight with such a thing, do you? It is a danger to everyone in here. A broken piece of sharp metal flying across the room. Ji-young did not answer. She simply looked at the Veth, her expression unreadable. This metal stick is a part of her heritage, Minsu said, stepping slightly in front of Ji-young. It is not a toy. Heritage is for museums, not for combat training, Kalen replied. It gestured with a long-fingered hand towards its plasma caster. This is modern combat, precision, power. A clean, efficient end to a conflict from a safe distance. What you practice is messy, it is emotional. It is why your species had so many problems during integration. Minsu's hands clenched into fists. He was about to retort when Ji-young spoke, her voice quiet but clear. Efficiency is not about distance, she said. It is about result. Kalen turned its full attention to her. Is that so? You believe your result would be better than mine? I did not say that, Ji-young said. But you think it, Kalen pressed. It seemed amused. Let us see then. A simple sparring match, no lethal force. My plasma caster set to its lowest stun setting against your heritage. It gestured to her sword. We will see which is more efficient. Minsu's blood ran cold. No, that is not a good idea. The risk I accept, Ji-young said, cutting him off. Minsu stared at her. Ji-young, a plasma burst, even on stun, can cause serious nerve damage. Your sword. She will use the flat of the blade or the sheathed weapon, Kalen said, enjoying this. We are just testing principles, are we not? The principle of modern power against ancient tradition. Ji-young gave a single, slow nod. She walked to the edge of the mat and picked up her sword. She did not unwrap it. She held the still-clothed weapon in her right hand. It was a long, narrow bundle. She walked back to the center of the mat and stood, waiting. Kalen retrieved its plasma caster. The weapon hummed to life, a blue glow emanating from its barrel. It took a position 20 paces away from Ji-young. The Gron, who had been watching with dull interest, now moved closer, its large arms crossed. A few other station personnel, drawn by the unusual scene, gathered at the entrance to the hall. Minsu's heart was pounding. He wanted to stop this. It was reckless. But he saw the look on Ji-young's face. It was not pride or anger. It was a calm, focused readiness. She was not doing this to prove a point. She was doing this because it was a test and she needed to know the outcome as much as the Veth did. Begin, the Gron grunted, acting as an unofficial referee. What happened next was so fast that later, the onlookers would all argue about the exact sequence of events. Kalen was lightning quick. It raised its plasma caster, the targeting sensor on the weapon instantly painting a red dot on Ji-young's chest. Its finger began to squeeze the trigger. Ji-young did not try to run away. She did not try to dodge to the side in a predictable manner. Instead, she dropped. It was not a fall, but a controlled, collapsing motion like a stone sinking into water. The low humming stun bolt sizzled through the air exactly where her chest had been a split second before. Before the sound of the missed shot had even faded, she was moving again. She pushed forward from her low stance, not standing up, but scooting across the mat like a snake. It was an ugly, undignified, and incredibly fast movement. Kalen, surprised by the miss, adjusted its aim. It was a highly trained soldier and its reactions were superb. It fired again. Ji-young was already rolling. The blue bolt scorched the mat where she had just been. She was now halfway across the distance between them. She was not a target running in a straight line. She was a blur of unpredictable motion, staying low, presenting the smallest possible target. Kalen fired a third time, a hint of panic entering its precise movements. The bolt went wide, and then Ji-young was there. She had closed the 20-pace distance in the time it took the Veth to fire 3 shots. She was inside the weapon's effective range, so close that the long barrel of the plasma caster was useless. Kalen's eyes widened. It tried to back away to bring the weapon down in a striking motion. It was too late. Ji-young's wrapped sword moved twice. The first motion was a sharp upward tap on the Veth's wrist. There was a crisp sound. Kalen let out a sharp hiss of pain and surprise, and its fingers sprang open. The plasma caster clattered to the floor. Before the weapon had even settled, the end of Ji-young's cloth-wrapped sword was pressing gently, but firmly, against the soft spot under Kalen's jaw. A single hard thrust there would be fatal. The entire fight had lasted 6 seconds. The training hall was utterly silent. The Gron was staring, its mouth slightly open. The others at the door were frozen. Ji-young held the pose for a single long second, making sure everyone understood the result. Then she slowly lowered her sword. She took a step back, giving the Veth space. Kalen was clutching its numb wrist, its large black eyes wide with shock and humiliation. It looked from its fallen weapon to the small, calm human who had so easily defeated it. You did not fight with honor," the Veth stammered, its whispery voice shaking. "You crawled on the ground." Ji-young tilted her head. "Honor is a luxury for the safe," she said, her voice still quiet, but now it carried through the silent hall. "The ground was there, I used it. Your weapon expects a standing target. I did not stand." Minsu felt a surge of pride so strong it almost brought tears to his eyes. This was it. This was the lesson he had tried to teach for so long. The lesson the galaxy had forgotten. It was not about fair play. It was about winning. It was about using every single advantage, no matter how small or undignified. He walked onto the mat and stood beside Ji-young. He looked at Kalen, not with anger, but with a new authority. "She is correct," Minsu said, his voice strong and clear. "You lost because you assumed the fight would happen on your terms. You assumed she would behave like a modern soldier. She did not. She behaved like a survivor of the Galactic Wars. And in a real fight, the survivor is the one who is still standing at the end." He looked around at the small crowd. "This is what we forgot. This is why she is here." He turned and led Ji-young from the mat. No one tried to stop them. No one said a word. They just watched the two humans walk away. One a rediscovered mentor, the other a living ghost from a forgotten war, her simple, cloth-wrapped sword hanging silently on her back. The walk back to Minsu's workshop was quiet. The bright, busy corridors of the station felt different now. People did not look at them with pity or ignore them completely. A few beings who had been in the training hall gave them a wide berth, their eyes wide with a new kind of respect, mixed with a little fear. Minsu walked with his shoulders back, his head held high. For the first time in years, he did not feel like he needed to hide. When the door to his workshop hissed shut behind them, the familiar silence of the room welcomed them back. But it was a different silence now. Before, it had been the silence of giving up. Now it was the silence of concentration, of purpose. Minsu turned to look at Ji-young. She was unwrapping the cloth from her sword, her movement slow and careful. The dull gray metal of the blade was revealed again. The words Galactic Wars seemed to glow in the dim light. "You took a big risk," Minsu said, his voice calm. "He could have seriously hurt you." Ji-young placed the naked sword on his workbench. It looked out of place among the scattered wires and circuit boards. It was an object from another time. "It was a calculated risk," she replied, looking at the blade. His pride was involved. He would aim to stun, not to kill, and he expected a stand-up fight. He did not expect pragmatism. Pragmatism. Minsu repeated the word. It was a good word for what he had seen. It was not pretty, but it was effective. He gestured to the sword. "May I?" She nodded. He reached out and picked it up. The sword was lighter than he expected, perfectly balanced. The handle felt worn and smooth in his grip. He did not swing it. He just held it, feeling its weight, its history. This weapon had been passed down through generations. It had been held by human hands during the darkest hours of their history. The weight of that was immense. You said you are a guardian, he said, still looking at the blade. A keeper of memory. What does that really mean? Do you just practice forms in secret? Do you wait for a war that may never come? Ji-young was silent for a moment, choosing her words. The galaxy thinks our greatest achievements are our starships or our fusion reactors, she began. They are impressive, but they are not our greatest achievement. Our greatest achievement was our survival. When we were weak and outnumbered, we survived. We did it by being smarter, by being more stubborn, and by being willing to do whatever it took. She pointed a finger at her own temple. That mindset, that spirit is our real strength. It is a flame. And a flame can be forgotten. It can go out. My family and a few others, we are the keepers of that flame. We remember the old ways not because they are the best ways, but because they contain the truth of who we are and what we can become when pushed to the edge. Minsu carefully placed the sword back on the bench. So you remember, so you do not forget. But you came to me to learn new things. Why? Because memory is not enough, Ji-young said, her voice intense. The world has changed. I can know 100 ways to disable an opponent with my hands. But if I do not understand how a modern security system works, I am useless. I can move quietly in a forest, but I need to learn how to move quietly on a space station filled with sensors. The old skills are the foundation, but they need to be adapted. I need to build a house on that foundation that can stand in this time, in this galaxy. She looked directly at him. You are the bridge, Minsu. You understand the old human spirit of combat, the cleverness, the adaptability. But you also understand the modern galaxy. You know its technology, its tactics, its weaknesses. I do not need you to teach me how to fight. I need you to teach me how to fit in, how to make my ancient purpose relevant today. Minsu finally understood completely. She was not his student in the traditional way. She was more like a partner, a colleague from a different department. She had the core knowledge, and he had the contextual application. His self-pity over his past accident felt shameful now. He had been mourning one life, which was a terrible thing, while she was preparing to safeguard the future of an entire species. His personal failure was a tragedy, but abandoning his duty because of it was a choice. She was giving him a chance to make a different choice. The Veth Kalen, Minsu said. He relied entirely on his weapon. The moment I was inside his guard, he was helpless. His training did not cover that. Most of them don't, Ji-young said. They trust their technology too much. It makes them strong, but it also makes them predictable. It makes them soft. And you think this is a widespread weakness? Minsu asked. It is a vulnerability, she corrected. A crack in their armor. Most of the galaxy has lived in peace and comfort for a long time. They have forgotten the taste of real fear. We have not. We remember. That memory is our weapon. Minsu looked around his workshop. The broken data slates and shattered appliances seemed like relics from a past life, a small, unimportant life. He had been hiding here, fixing small problems when he had the skills to help with a problem of galactic importance. What is the plan, then? He asked, his voice firm. What do we do? A faint smile, the first he had ever seen on her face, touched Ji-young's lips. It transformed her. She was no longer just a solemn guardian. She was a young woman with a mission, and she was no longer alone. First, she said, we stop thinking of me as just a student. We are collaborators. You will teach me about modern station systems, security networks, and the capabilities of the other species' military technology. In return, I will help you remember the core principles of human survival combat. We will work together to create a new system, a way of fighting and thinking that combines the best of our past with the realities of our present. She picked up her sword and sheathed it in a single fluid motion. We start small. We find others. Others? Minsu asked, surprised. There are a few, she said. Not many. A pilot who knows the old navigation tricks. A doctor who remembers the field medicine from the wars. We are scattered, disconnected, but we are here. My first task was to find a teacher, a strategist. I found you. Our next task is to start connecting the pieces. Minsu felt a thrill of excitement mixed with fear. This was bigger than he had imagined. It was not just about training one person. It was about building something, a network, a quiet, unseen shield for humanity. He looked at Ji-young, this young woman who carried the weight of centuries on her shoulders. He saw the fierce determination in her eyes, and he felt an answering fire ignite in his own chest. His workshop was no longer a prison. It had become a headquarters. All right, Minsu said, a new energy in his voice. Then we get to work. The change in Minsu was visible to anyone who knew where to look. The slouch was gone from his shoulders. The dullness had left his eyes. He no longer spent his days hiding in his workshop. Now he was a constant presence in the station's main training hall, but he was not there for himself. He stood on the edge of a training mat, his voice clear and confident. In front of him was a small mixed group of recruits, 2 young humans, Agran and the Veth Kalen, who after his defeat had surprisingly asked to join. Minsu was not teaching them how to punch. He was teaching them how to think. "Your weapon is a tool," he said, pacing slowly. "It is not a magic wand. What happens when its power cell is drained? What happens when its targeting sensor fails in an ion storm? You must be more than your equipment. Your first weapon is here." He tapped his temple. "Your second weapon is your body. Everything else is a bonus." He demonstrated a simple, efficient move to disarm an opponent who was bigger and stronger. It was a move Ji-young had shown him, a principle from the Galactic Wars. Use your enemy's strength against them. The Grand recruit tried it, and to its astonishment, it worked. Across the hall, Ji-young practiced alone. But her practice was different now. She was not just doing the old forms. She was adapting them. She moved through an obstacle course designed for modern soldiers, but she moved like a ghost. She used shadows and blind spots that the course designers had never considered. She was applying her ancient knowledge to a modern environment, just as she and Minsu had planned. Sometimes she would stop and talk to Minsu's students. She did not say much. She would simply point out a vulnerability, a different way to move, a more efficient grip. The students listened to her with a deep respect. The story of her fight with Kalen had spread. She was no longer the quiet girl from the lower decks. She was the woman with the sword. Minsu watched her sometimes, a feeling of deep satisfaction warming him. He had not just found a student. He had found a purpose that was bigger than his own failure. He was helping to prepare the next generation, not just for a fight, but for survival. He was the bridge, just as she had said. It was during one of these sessions that the station-wide alert blared. A sharp, piercing sound followed by a calm, automated voice. "Emergency. Containment breach in hydroponic sector Gamma. A Class 2 maintenance drone has experienced a critical weapon system failure. It is hostile. All personnel evacuate the area. Security teams respond." The training hall froze. A Class 2 drone was not a small cleaner bot. It was a large, heavy machine used for repairs, equipped with powerful cutting lasers and manipulator arms. A weapon system failure could mean it was firing those lasers randomly. It was essentially a heavily armored, out-of-control tank. A moment later, a second, more frantic communication came over the security channel. "Team 3 is pinned down. Our plasma rifles are not penetrating its chassis. We need heavy support now." Minsu's eyes met Ji-young's across the hall. There was no need for words. They both knew. This was not a war, but it was a test. A test of their new, old way of thinking. "Come on," Minsu said to his small group of students. He was not ordering them to fight. He was ordering them to observe. "Stay behind me. Do not engage." They moved quickly through the corridors, which were now empty and flashing with red emergency lights. When they reached the entrance to hydroponic sector Gamma, they saw the scene. The air was thick with the smell of burnt metal and ozone. A security team was crouched behind a stack of supply crates, their faces pale. In the center of the large room, the massive maintenance drone was stomping in a slow circle. One of its cutting arms was extended, a bright red laser firing in short, dangerous bursts, scorching the walls and ceiling. The security team's plasma fire splashed harmlessly against its thick, reinforced shell. The head of the security team, a human named Day, saw Minsu. "Minsu, get back! This thing is unstoppable. We are waiting for the anti-armor unit from Deck 1. "It will be too late," Minsu said, his voice calm. He analyzed the situation with new eyes. He was not looking at an unstoppable machine. He was looking at a problem with weaknesses. He turned to Ji-young. "Its armor is too strong for their weapons. But look at the joints. The articulation points at the elbows and the base of the laser arm. They are weaker." Ji-young was already watching the drone's pattern. It turned, stomped, and fired in a predictable, programmed loop. She nodded. "It is slow. Its programming is simple. It does not expect a close-range threat." "What are you going to do?" Day asked, his voice frantic. "We are going to create a distraction," Minsu said. He looked at his students. "Kalen, you are fast. I need you to draw its fire. Run in a zigzag pattern from that console to the water tank. Do not stop. The rest of you make noise. Bang on the walls, yell, confuse its audio sensors. It was a crazy plan. But the students, having seen what Minsu and Ji-young could do, did not hesitate. Kalen took off, its long legs moving in a blur. The others started shouting and pounding on the metal walls. The drone's sensor head swiveled, confused by the multiple inputs. It fired its laser at Kalen, but the Veth was too fast and unpredictable. The bolt sizzled harmlessly into the floor behind it. This was Ji-young's moment. While the drone was distracted, she moved. She did not run across the open space. She used the cover of the tall hydroponic racks, moving between the dense leaves of genetically modified plants. She was a shadow, silent and unseen. In seconds, she was behind the drone. It was huge, towering over her. The sound of its motors was deafening. She saw the joint where the powerful cutting laser was attached to the main body. It was a complex mess of hydraulics and wiring, protected by a thinner layer of metal. The drone began to turn, sensing her presence. There was no time for a graceful, powerful strike. There was only time for efficiency. Ji-young's sword flashed. It was not a slash, but a precise, powerful thrust. The monomolecular edge, designed centuries ago to pierce advanced alloys, slid straight into the weak point of the joint. There was a shower of sparks and a sharp screech of tearing metal. She pulled the blade out and struck again, higher up, severing a main hydraulic line. Thick, black fluid sprayed out. The drone's laser arm went limp. It sparked and smoked, dangling uselessly. The drone itself staggered, its systems failing. It tried to turn, but its motors whined and ground to a halt. It was dead. The sudden silence was overwhelming. The security team slowly stood up from behind their crates. They stared at the disabled drone, then at the small woman standing calmly beside it, wiping her blade clean with a cloth. Day walked forward, his mouth open. He looked from the sparking joint, precisely targeted and destroyed, to Ji-young's simple sword. How did you? Minsu walked up and put a hand on Day's shoulder. She did not fight its strength, he said softly. She attacked its weakness. It is an old lesson, one we should not have forgotten. The Gron and Veth recruits looked at Minsu and Ji-young with a new, profound understanding. This was not about primitive versus advanced. It was about smart versus stupid. It was about using your brain. The woman with the old sword and the teacher with the new methods had just saved lives by remembering something simple and true. Ji-young sheathed her sword and walked over to Minsu. She did not smile, but her eyes were calm and clear. The job was done. Minsu looked at her, then at his students, and finally at the disabled machine. The broken teacher was gone. The mentor had returned. And the reminder of humanity's fierce practical spirit was no longer a secret. It was a living, breathing force on the Aegis Spire, ready for whatever came next.